Happy Wednesday night. Welcome to Deep in the Plus. I'm your host, Rob Whiteside. Thank you guys, as always, for being with us. We appreciate you. If you're new to the show, please make sure to subscribe to WDWNT TV for more great content, and also give us a thumbs up as it helps people to find us. And tonight, we're going to do a watch-along with the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Tom Corliss.
Happy Valentine's Day.
I know. I told everybody last week that I was going to have my Valentine on, and they were like, what? And I was like, yeah, Tom Corliss. And they were like, wait a minute. I appreciate you doing this with me, man.
No, I'm happy to be here. I'm glad we could make it work. I know my schedule is insane, but I'm glad there was a Wednesday that worked.
It is, and like we talked about, there's a bunch of them I'm holding for you. So we still have like The Boys and Waking Sleeping Beauty and 20,000 Leagues
There's
at
a
some
long
point.
list.
There is a long list. So tonight what we're going to be talking about is Behind the Attraction. Season 1 came out in, let's see, it was July 21st, 2021. It came out, I think it hit Disney Plus the same time as the Jungle Cruise did, because producer Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, why not? And the first episode was the Jungle Cruise. It was 10 things. You know what? When
People
this first
love
came
him
out,
now. He has a lot of fans right now. He's certainly not being booed in arenas of 20 or 30,000 people currently.
so it's a good time to be The Rock.
Oh, it's a great time to be right now on the board of directors on a company that has a huge scandal going on. And so two names you're going to see, obviously Dwayne Johnson and Brian Gewirtz, who's a producer on this series. They came from WWE, and now Brian is back with The Rock at WWE, where they're doing great.
All right, we'll move past that part then. Season 1 with 10 episodes. It dropped 5 in July and 5 in August. I enjoyed it. The one thing that I think was a little bit of a, I'm not sure how I feel about this, is Paget Brewster. Paget Brewster is hosting it. The banter felt a little bit America's Funniest Home Videos to me at the time, but I feel like it's grown on me. What do you think about her banter? It's a script,
like if
obviously.
Disney Food Blog hosted documentaries about Disney theme park attractions. That's how season 1 felt. I think
Wow.
they brought it back. They toned it down a little in season 2. I thought season 2 was way more palatable than season 1.
Okay.
Correct me if you feel differently, but that's the way I felt. Season 1, there were several episodes that I muted at some point. But season 2, I was like, okay, you toned down the nonsense a little bit. And now it's just more fun and less weird.
Yeah, there's a Howie Mandel show, and I forget, it's called like Animals Doing Things. It's something that you accidentally shows up on your TV sometimes, and I hated it so much. And that was kind of how I felt about that pattern. At the same time, I love watching behind the scenes stuff, and you know so much about Disney parks. I've just been absorbed with stuff about Disney parks. I love the behind the scenes stuff, but I love rewatching it when it's packaged in a different way, and this is definitely packaged in a different way from, say, the Imagineering story. So it's very palatable, very small chunks. However, season 2,
I think this is for less serious fans. I'm not saying we won't enjoy it. Like the Imagineering story, like I think the hardcore fans, that was for us. And I think this is for everyone. This is, the kids can watch, you can watch, and even if you've only been to the parks once, you could put these on, and it's very palatable and easy watching. It's opposed to an Imagineering story where it's like watching like Ken Burns baseball. Like you need to be paying attention if you want to follow what's going on.
fair. But I mean, again, I enjoy seeing it repackaged. I like the behind the scenes interviews and things. Like I said, the wacky banter was a little bit over the top for me, but I agree. In season 2, it's a little bit different. Season 2 has 6 episodes in it. We're just going to be watching along with season 2, episode 1 tonight. So if you're watching at home, please get it ready. Disney Plus, Pirates of the Caribbean is the first episode. And one of the other things about this is, as I was looking through this episode is tied for the longest episode out of all 16. It's 50 minutes runtime. The Epcot one is also 50 minutes, which kind of surprised me because most of them first season were like 40 some. And like you were saying, it's a little bit more snackable content when it's like 38, 40 minutes. 50's, nigh on an episode of Game of Thrones. So, but there's a lot of information.
Epcot will fly because it's a whole park. And someday we'll get to that one, and we'll talk about all my problems with that episode. But Pirates, I think for an audience that is new to this or does not know any of this, I think it's the right amount of time to touch on essentially 5 attractions and a film series.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, the one that bothered me the most in season 6 or season 2 was episode 6, which was the nighttime shows, because somebody didn't tell them Harmonious
Yeah,
was going away when they made this thing, which landed after Harmonious was already disassembled. So I don't know
yeah.
what they were doing there. All right, so thanks again for everybody watching. Get ready to go. Pirates of the Caribbean episode 1 of season 2. We're gonna hit it now in 3, 2, 1. So the intro,
I
what do
hope
you
we're
think of
in
this
sync. Who
intro?
knows?
Are you watching the intro right now?
Yeah,
Okay, let's not skip
we're
it.
probably
What do you
close
think of
enough.
this? What do you think of this intro though? Because it's the same intro.
It's
Is
fine.
it?
It's short. It's sweet. It's to the point. The art's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like it. It's got the whole the voiceover, and you get to see a little bit of everything. So yeah, I think it's kind of neat. I always skip it now because it's like you see it once, you don't need to see it again. And then we roll
Luckily,
behind
it's
the
not very
attraction.
long.
Yeah. One of the things, and I'm going to shoot back and forth between this is where I am right now. One of the things that I enjoyed about seeing it this time on this was they had a lot of actual behind the scenes, like we're letting you see behind stuff in this one, which I don't think you usually see, like the
No,
attraction.
this like those shots made this episode.
Yeah.
Because that's stuff you actually haven't seen, like going through
Yes.
that doorway and some of these scenes in full light.
You ever been evac from a Pirates ride?
No,
Oh, okay. So
no, I've never
then,
been evac from Pirates.
yeah. Well, it's either because
Mansion,
it's
yeah, not
okay.
Pirates.
Um, so as we're going through this one and watching it, they're talking about basically in general the pirates and the attraction, and then we start getting into individually, each scene of it, but um, or each iteration of it, from the original one in 1967 in Disneyland to the one in 1971 and all, or 73, and all the stuff that happened at Disney World, to up to the Shanghai one now. Um, so I found the whole thing to be pretty interesting, but I've got a lot of questions for you as we're moving through this one. So buckle
Okay,
up. Um,
look at that book. Oh my God, I love it.
that's their manual, right?
Those sell for so much money. If you want to own a real Disney Parks maintenance manual, there, especially with the covers like that, the original Disney World covers,
Yeah.
talking several $1,000s.
How many do you own?
None. I actually don't.
Um,
They're hard to display, and I don't have like I've held a number of them and paged through them, and that's I'm good. Like I don't know, it's just not for me. It's never the most exciting thing to own. Look, if I had unlimited funds, sure, but I don't know. It's a hard thing to display.
yeah. The part we're seeing right now, they're talking about Walt, and I like that they always go back to Walt and his love for adventure and stories and pirates. The thing they talk about here, though, is the Treasure Island movie, and this is the one. Usually, there's like one little nugget that I'm like, "Huh, I never thought of that." Is they're talking about the original Pirates or the original Treasure Island movie, and I believe the gentleman's name was Newman. Is that right? The guy who I'm looking for it in my notes here.
Well, they're going to mention it in a minute, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. Robert Newton was
Yeah.
the Long John Silver in this one, and they said pirate speak in general came from him in this
Yeah.
movie. Like they're saying Disney like invented the arg and the pirate speak that we have today, which I'm like, okay, that makes sense. It tracks, but
Yeah.
I never thought about it.
I mean, this was a big movie, so and all at the dawn of popular culture too, right? So uh, it's not surprising that it had an effect. But like you, I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. And what's funny is since it was said on this episode, I've heard it 5 more times in different things. So it was like a hidden fact until this came out, and now suddenly every little thing I've watched since then brings this up.
Yeah. I mean, again, I this is tonight, or I rewatched this in preparation, and that was the point that I was like, most of the rest of this I know, we've talked about, we've
Yeah.
seen, but this is the one that I was like, oh wow, that's actually kind of cool. So
But then also, what's funny is Disney was behind the curve on pirate attractions, right? So even like their competition and the ripoff parks of the time had pirate rides. So Freedom Land, which was built in the Bronx by people that were fired from Disneyland, had a pirate attraction. So Disney was behind the curve. Obviously, they blew them away when they built theirs, but pirate rides existed at amusement parks.
Um, and you're gonna know this fact, and I don't. The land that existed that had like the Dixieland music before New Orleans Square, Magnolia Terrace, is that
Magnolia
what
Park,
that's?
you just said it.
Yeah. So,
Aunt
like
Jemima Pancake House.
I was
So
unaware
kind
of
of
that. Like I'm more of an East Coast guy, but I love Disneyland, so I was unaware of that land actually existing. So seeing like the ragtime music and all that existing
yeah. It
before
was kind of like
New
a
Orleans Square.
subland. You know how Adventureland in Florida we have Caribbean Plaza, and then there's the rest of Adventureland, and they're two very distinct areas, right? So they're
Yeah.
one land with very separate areas. That was Magnolia Park was a very you know separate area that was still I believe Frontierland and not Adventureland.
Well, it's again, that was another one that I was like, huh, didn't realize that part. Um,
Yeah,
but you know, and we'll talk about this a little bit when they talk about changing pirates, but like, the idea of pirates were not great guys, and so the idea that they would, theme this whole attraction to it in a family park, I think we're talking about right now Mark Davis in this. Mark Davis was the reason that it worked, right?
I mean Mark Davis was the reason a lot of things worked. Mark's name gets brought up enough, and it's probably gets brought up a lot, but it's still probably not enough to really give you the idea of how much of an impact Mark had on the Disney parks.
Yeah.
The art of staging, the art of gags. That's all Mark. Like the Jungle Cruise, Pirates, the funny parts of Mansion, essentially almost everything in the Tiki Room, even though it gets misassigned to some other folks, is all Mark Davis.
One of the things you were talking about Mansion is that I've heard, like, we did a review of Behind the Attraction Haunted Mansion from season one already. If you guys want to go back and check it out, but with Mansion, I feel like I've heard a million times all of the legend of Yale Gracie and Rolly Crump and all of the people who were involved with it. I feel like I didn't know until I watched this how many of these Imagineers. I mean, obviously it makes sense they were working on this around the same time, but how many of these Imagineers were like key to pulling this together, from X to Alice to to Bob Gurr,
Yeah,
all of them. It's
it was a
amazing.
team effort, just like Mansion. Yeah,
Yeah, but I
but
don't think
so
it
much.
gets the
I will
love
tell you, so
usually.
much of what you probably love about the attraction, a good majority of it's going to be Mark Davis, especially Pirates. Like Mansion, I think is a little more of everybody. A good amount of Pirates is really Mark.
Of all the Disney things that you've done, how much do you hate it that you weren't alive for the 1964 World's Fair? My
Well,
parents
the
went,
next
and
best
my
thing,
dad.
my parents went, so
Okay, yeah,
um,
my parents went too. I
it's
didn't get.
in the
I
family.
wasn't born yet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's in
my
the
dad
family, and I
always.
got to see everything but the full Ford Magic Skyway. I got to see. So
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, my dad talked about it fondly. Packed the my older brother and sister up. They went and did it and had a great time and talked about it lovingly. And every time I see something like this for the 1964 World's Fair, I go, ah,
yeah,
if only. And you probably didn't know
my
at
parents
the
didn't.
1960 World's Fair.
My parents didn't have to pack the car; they just got on the bus or the train. It was right in our
Well,
backyard.
now you're just showing off. Um, so the flume system, they were talking about the fact that they
Yeah,
all the things they learned, and we kind of again heard this about Haunted Mansion, but all the things they learned at the 1960 World's 64 World's Fair about audio animatronics, about the flume systems for the boats, all of this were game changers not only for Mansion but for Pirates to be able to create something from what was going to be a wax museum to now we've got like a real ride through.
to become the most profound thing that's ever been done in the art form. Really, the thing that we talk about Disneyland 1955 being the birth of the art form. Like, yeah, like the idea of a clean and very heavily themed park begins in 1955, but Disneyland doesn't really start to become Disneyland until 59, and then I think that the transformation is completed in the late 60s with New Tomorrowland, Pirates, and Mansion. That's when it becomes Disneyland. That's when it becomes a Disney park as you and I know it. Right? And the truth is, like, while technology has changed, it hasn't really evolved past the ideas of what happened in 67, 68, 69. Of, you build these immersive attractions that are heavily themed with figures that look like they're real. And, the idea of what a theme park can be is still based on what it was in those years.
Yeah. Well, again, these people who put these things together, that Walt would say do it and they would do it. It's amazing to see, and I know that you've done some Back to the Futures about things like Journey into Imagination, and we may never see anything as amazing as that turntable in ride systems again.
I think things generally have gotten less impressive just because, what this time all of this is space age technology to the world, right? Like, robots don't exist. Like, the Walt Disney Company invents robots, right? Like, all the steps since then are not like there's incredible achievements, but they all pale in comparison to, like, there's not a lot you walk into today and you're like, this is the entire world is different now than it was before I entered this building. Like, projection technology is projection technology. Yeah, it'll go further and further, but I don't think we'll ever experience what people did in the 60s at Disneyland, where they walked into a building and birds started talking to them. And then pirates were, a whole building inhabited by pirates who were alive.
Yeah.
That had to be mind blowing. And I think technology has come so far in everything that, like, things can be impressive, but never like life changing. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I think you're right. I mean, there are, but again, I look at the effort they put into things like Epcot, like original Epcot, like
Yeah.
Disneyland, and go, how? I mean, how did they pull it off? And yet now, like they were talking about something later about a budget, and that they couldn't do something in Shanghai because of a budget. The chicken thing, and I'm like. It feels like at that time back with Walt, he would have just said, make it happen then. Like, just do it. Like, even if we have to spend the money or pull it from over here, we want the experience to be this awesome. Now they kind of dial them down just to have them fit in the budget, and then we get something that's a little bit lackluster from time to time.
Well, I mean, right, that's true of Walt. But once Walt reached a point where money was no object, sure. And Walt, at the end of Walt's life, that's kind of a thing, but it also kind of isn't, right? Like, Walt Disney World was going to use all the money they had, right? So there would have been, you know, there would have been things he would have had to give up on the Disney World project inevitably. Just like there were on Epcot Center. It just there wasn't enough. There wasn't all the money in the world to do it. At this time, though, like, the company's private and very successful. Like, he could rub a little more money on pirates at any point. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think,
But in
again, with them,
1955, he couldn't, right? I mean, that's why all the stores on Main Street released. That's why he didn't own the hotel. That's why he was doing television shows. Like, he couldn't afford to do everything he wanted to in 1955.
but I guess I think of it in terms of he knew he couldn't do it now, but he could possibly do it later. I don't know that they think in those terms anymore, though. Like you said, he took over all those shops on Main Street. He knew that he was going to polish up, some of these other attractions. I don't know. I guess I just see it differently, as in they kind of do it and they move on. But not to say that they don't still do some pretty cool things. I want to ask
Yeah.
you something about the boats. In one of the early pictures that we missed here, or that came by, one of the boats was named Camille. Are they still named? Do you know? It had Camille on the boat on the side,
Oh
which
yeah,
felt
in California for sure. I think they're named after pirates, I believe. It's so dark there, and the way it docks in the load and unload. I don't know that I've ever really taken time to read them, but they're
well,
their names. They're there.
and I'm not sure you'd really necessarily be able to get to see it unless you were. beside
I
it
think they're still
somehow.
there. Maybe they aren't. I don't even know. It's so dark
Yeah.
in there, and the boats. People got so heavy that the boats go so low that if they are there, I don't know if you'd even know.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. People got so heavy. um, one of the things they talk about with this, which is very famous, is the idea that they couldn't create this, and they talked about this earlier. I'm just kind of getting around to it, but they couldn't create this in the boundaries of the park, so they had to have you go down a waterfall and outside of the berm to a show building,
Yeah.
which again is outside the box thinking. I mean, I know they say that, but it is true. It's outside the box thinking that, hey, we can't build it in here, but we can build it outside, and we can get people down underneath to get there. It seems like such a journey at the one at Disneyland to do that, and then I think at Disney World, obviously, they
Yeah.
were just trying to replicate what they had to make happen at Disneyland.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about Disney World when we get there, but Mark got to do a couple things he wanted to do, and then had to make a lot of trade-offs. He lost a lot of things he wanted. Um, the Florida one, because and he wasn't going to win that fight, so he just didn't fight.
Let me ask you about
But
this
yeah, I
because
mean, the idea of building things out beyond the berm, even at parks where being landlocked wasn't so much of a problem, this still changes the industry a bit. This idea, right? There are lots of attractions where, just to get you away from the entrance, because they don't want a big building looming in the background, they kind of send you far away, right?
yeah.
There's a lot of these where they do this kind of stuff, even though they necessarily didn't have to.
I remember having that conversation with my sister once and telling her, isn't it cool you can't see the show building of the Haunted Mansion in the Magic Kingdom? And she's like, what do you mean
Yeah,
show building? And I'm like, did you think the entire attraction was happening in that small frame of a house? Okay, well, cool. I'm glad that the
yeah.
magic is still with you, but yeah, the show buildings are. I think I became like aware of them with the original Sky Ride at Disney World, where you would go over Fantasyland and look down and see
Yeah.
all the buildings from there, which is one reason I'm
Things
glad
you
it's not
wouldn't
there
think
anymore.
of. Yeah.
Yeah. Bob Gurr talks in this about having made multiple parts for animatronics to be able to cobble them together to make whatever they needed to make. I think, to
Hmm.
me, a quintessential Disney attraction has an animatronic in it, and I know lately we've kind of not had a lot of animatronics. I know that you just did a news today on the new animatronic for Tiana, but I know that like we
Yeah.
didn't get any for, like, we didn't get as many as we wanted for Toy Story. We didn't get any for Guardians. Like, it seems like they just had like buckets of bolts and they were going to make hundreds of them at this point.
What'd
And
you
it
get
seems
for
like,
Toy Story? Oh, I guess Wheezy.
well, you
I
have
guess
Wheezy,
he's
but
an
there was supposed to be
animatronic.
another outside show scene, right?
There were supposed to be a bunch of more show scenes to that Slinky Dog thing.
Yeah.
Just I don't know that there were more animatronics though. But
Gotcha.
Guardians began its life with Cosmic Rewind. Began its life with animatronics. That went through a lot of different versions before they arrived at what they did. There were animatronics in the pre-show. There were animatronics in the show building, and then by the end there were none. And even to the point where they ended up with that final scene where you might wonder why there's a bunch of big empty space in that final scene where the Guardians appear on that screen.
Right.
And the reason is because they cut everything away. At one point, it had animatronics, and then one point, it just was a recreation of a living room scene from Horizons as a nod to Horizons. And then they cut that away and just kept the screen.
Oh, the things that could have been.
Yeah.
Now we're
And
talking about Alice Davis.
how
Good.
expensive could that living room have been, right? I don't know.
Probably not very at all, and would have meant everything to, especially
Yeah.
to the fanboys. We're looking at Alice Davis. They're talking about costuming for these,
Yeah.
and I know that she's famous for the costuming of the It's a Small World dolls, but obviously did the costuming here. Like name a better power couple than Mark and Alice Davis. Talk about
You can't.
Valentine's. Yeah.
You can't. I mean, what a duo. I mean, this all the right people in the right place at the right time. Like all of these people that get mentioned in this episode, wildly talented.
Yeah.
And what a magical group of people to have together at this time, and you could see the talent and the energy and the creativity.
Well, and I know like during this time they're telling the story about how Alice had said we want to make 2 sets of all of the costumes, and they said no. No, you're only going to make one. We don't want to hear about it. She's like, it won't take that much more time. They're like, nah. And then she did it anyway. And she said that when they had a fire in the
Yeah.
attraction, an actual fire in the attraction, and I think they talk about that a little bit later, so I'm jumping ahead, but
Yeah.
that they lost some of the the costumes, and that she
And it would
had
have
a second
delayed
set.
them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and they only were closed for a day because she had the backups to it. And then the
Yeah.
idea of, like, she says in this interview that she's in, I didn't know whether they wanted to hit me or to hug me. And I thought, well, obviously they want to hug you, because how did you pull that one off? Also, we're talking now about Yale Gracie. Like, I didn't know he was involved with the effects, but again, that fire effect when you come
Yeah.
in is like amazing.
Yeah.
And I love Bob Gurr talking about him here, going like, "Hey, like he would come out and just say, 'Come here, I want to show you something.'" Uh, I would always want to go find out what Yale Gracie had if he just had something he wanted to show you. This is like some amazing
Yeah.
effects that he came up with for
It's a
both.
shame. I mean, we've arrived at the point where Bob is all that's left of that generation, right? So the rest of these interviews are all archival.
Yeah,
Um, Bob's the only one left of that generation.
yeah, and I mean that hit me while I was watching this, and seeing him, because I know that he is still very active with Disney fans,
Yeah.
and so. But the fire scene, again, very famous for looking so realistic, and then them actually having a fire. I don't know that I'd heard that, but yeah, it's
Here you go.
so.
Here's your fire story.
Yep, actual fire. There's Alice. Um, yeah, I don't. I mean, again, there are certain attractions that I feel like everyone has to ride when they go into a Disney park. I feel like you have to do Haunted Mansion, you have to do Pirates, you have to do Small World, because they're
Yeah.
so quintessential. And the idea that you know that it didn't exist for the first 12 years of Disneyland is almost like boggling, mind-boggling to me.
I always love this footage of them driving the figures down the road. That was really done for show. Obviously, typically they wouldn't just have the figures unwrapped standing in the back of a truck. It was done for the Disneyland TV show.
Yeah. Yep. Um, so then they had the opening of New Orleans Square, and all the pirates and everything that were happening around
Well,
it.
New
But
Orleans Square was the year before,
right, well, I was going to say that they didn't
66,
have
and
the
then Pirates
attraction,
in 67.
and of course, Walt passed away before the attraction was open. But again, they
Yeah.
they talk about that. The show scenes are kind of amazing. You would agree that the one in Disneyland is better than the one in Disney World, yes?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I
I
mean, the
mean,
saddest thing about being a Disney World fan, like if you grew up going to Disney World specifically and then you begin to broaden your horizon and eventually go to all the others, the sad realization is that you grew up loving the worst pirates ever built. And someone got real mad in the comments a couple weeks ago and talked about this, and they're like, "Yeah, it might be, but like it's discrediting." But yeah, it's still like a work of art. It's still great, but all the other ones are just so far beyond ours, and it's clear Mark really had to settle a lot when they built ours.
yeah. Well, and I mean, they're coming up to that now. Is that when Disney World opened up in
Yeah,
1971, and people came in, they'd been watching The Wonderful World of Disney or Disneyland, and they saw this whole Pirates of the Caribbean attraction open on the West Coast, and there wasn't one in Florida. And again, this is a story that, like, I paused and had this conversation with my wife, because I was like, let me tell you before they tell you how this happened. But I think the first D23 Expo, they had the Western River Expedition model. I,
yeah.
I
I
that
don't think it
that
was the
that
first one. I think it was two or three in, but yeah.
that still makes me sad. I wish that existed.
It's such a shame we were robbed of seeing this. That being said, if you go back and look at like what would have been Western River, what we're experiencing with Splash Mountain right now would be happening. They would be neutering it because there were a lot of problems, right? But what's interesting is they kept delaying Western River. You'll watch Mark's art change, and you could see him dial back the stereotypical Native American depictions in the ride. But that being said, like gun violence and all that other stuff, it would have been real interesting to see where Western River would have stood today, and if it would have been overlaid with. Thankfully, I still don't think the Walt Disney Company would have mustered a Western IP either way, so we might have been safe, or maybe it would have been a Woody's Roundup ride already. Who knows?
Well, the whole thing was so ambitious and would have been a great addition, but I guess everyone wanted to see the Pirates attraction that they had seen about. I get the idea and the concept of if you're from the East, you don't know about the Wild West, so cowboys may seem like a better idea, or if you're from the West, then the Pirates of the Caribbean seems like a better idea. But
But
I
they
don't know.
built a frontier land in California. Like
Yeah,
what?
great point. Great point.
Like, look, here's what I think actually happened. Right, all the Imagineers. It's well documented. All the Imagineers were livid that Roy wouldn't let them do almost anything original for that park. They After Walt died, he wanted to play it safe and build just the things they had already. And there were very few caveats. Right, Mickey Mouse Revue was a caveat. Hall of Presidents was a caveat, and that's kind of it. And then that's why I think they were like, well, we're really going to hold out on Pirates because Western River is going to be the thing that makes Disney World Disney World. And then they didn't get to do that because immediately people complained and put them in a hole. But of course, like they don't really get into this, but there was a period of time where even after Pirates was built, that they were still going to do Western River. But then every year it got a little less likely until finally it was very much dead.
Well, again, I would have loved to have seen that, especially because I like it now when you have something different on the West Coast than we do on the East Coast, because I think the idea of two exactly duplicated Galaxy's Edges makes me sad because I feel like there should be different opportunities when you go from one to the other.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm all game for there being things that maybe like they copy from overseas, where maybe most of us aren't going to get overseas. But the idea of making things different enough to go have the two experiences, and there are enough things that it still makes it worth your while to go to both. But
Yeah.
I would
But
have loved to
Disney
have seen
World's
that happen.
Pirates is not, you're not better for having seen it, right? Like our queue is cool, but that's really it, right? It's not. Look, like there are things I can say right now for all these other versions of Pirates we'll talk about where there is something interesting and unique about them that makes them a must see. But if you've seen the other ones and then go to the Disney World one, you're not going to see anything in the Disney World one that's going to wow you. There's nothing about it where you're going to be like, wow, that one aspect of ours is really neat.
Yeah.
It's just not.
So they jump
But
over the
this
Tokyo.
is
This
well,
is
we
this is
jumped over
Paris.
Tokyo, but now we're talking about the best pirates that they've built.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Mark Davis says it. That was one thing I didn't know. It gets brought up here. Alice, I think, says it. Mark went to the opening of Euro Disney and rode Pirates and said they nailed it, and which I think is the highest praise you could have ever gotten.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree with that. I just was surprised that they went so quickly over the one in Tokyo. Is it just that much similar to the one in Disneyland?
It's a weird amalgamation of the California and the Florida.
But
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 it's
but the
mostly the California, except the ending is our original ending for the most part.
Gotcha. Do they if they added Jack to the one in Tokyo?
They did, but they also still have the redhead.
This part, I guess, is part of the that we're seeing now. The fight. This is part of the one in Paris, like the
Yeah,
actual sword fighting. So, we're seeing him, seeing Tony here talk about it. But that's an amazing scene to see. Again, I don't know that I've ridden the one in Paris. I only went to Paris once, and I think I spent all my time waiting in line for Space Mountain. So,
oh,
um, I know. But there isn't one in Hong Kong. Why is
no.
that? Do you think just not enough space?
They
Well,
drew they drew plans for it. It was envisioned. Tim Delaney actually did art for it, and a bunch of people worked on it, and then it got skipped over. And then I think a lot of the inspiration of the Hong Kong version is what became the Shanghai version. I think.
gotcha. I remember you saying that if back when I was first listening to WDWNT, that you thought that if the redhead scene, the auction scene, was ever changed, there would be a riot. And then there, I mean, I think everybody went, it's time. I think
No,
nope.
no,
I
there
don't
was
remember
a
there being
lot of
any
backlash.
picketing.
There wasn't a riot, but there was a lot of backlash for that. And I've never met anyone who will look. You could be against the old scene existing, you could be offended by it. I have never met a human being who thinks the new scene is good.
Yeah.
Like, two things can be true, right? The original scene could be, it could be time for it to go, and also the replacement scene can be awful. And I think both of those are true.
Yeah. They're talking
10
right
for
now
a
about.
hen, like trying to replace We Wants the Redhead, and the best you came up with was, oh, it's 10 for a hen. Okay.
Well, maybe it could still be changed.
It can
So
be. None of this is permanent. I think they'll go back to that scene someday. I do think they're not married to it.
So this attraction, they're talking about the movies right now. I can't even tell you how many people I talk to in my life where they think that the attraction came after the movie. Have you run into those people in your life? Yeah, they do.
No, because I think New York, I think for New Yorkers, especially, it was a rite of passage to take the family to Florida, right? And so I think people remembered going on it before the movies exist. And I think I moved probably before people came of age who only lived in the time of the movies. So, and then you live in Florida where the average person knows a little bit more about Disney World. So I haven't really, I know those people exist. I haven't really encountered them.
I have run into that. People who were shocked that the attraction came first and then the movies. But anyway, they're talking now about the changing the redhead scene. Obviously,
Well,
I
they
jumped
talked
ahead
about the
on that one.
first, so the first changes were 97.
Yeah.
Disneyland and Disney World switched it to where the women chase the men. That was the first political correctness change. I remember that was a real big deal. Even that's pre-internet, real. I mean, internet existed, but most people weren't on it talking about Disney. Um, and then, yeah, many years later, then we go down the redhead route.
Yeah. Um, do you think that the addition of the Jack Sparrow and the movie stuff to the attraction is too much, was not enough, or was just the right amount?
I think it was just the right amount, but I think we've arrived at the point now where it's time for it to go away. It's
Okay,
no longer relevant, and it's just it's weighing down the attraction, I think.
interesting. So it's kind of like Pirates under new management, and we just need to take it back to Walt Disney's original vision for the
Hmm.
Pirates. I mean, there
I
have
think
been
it's
little
time.
effects like the smoke screen that had Davy Jones on it, and Blackbeard that went away, and
It's
the
gone.
sirens and that went away. So it does make sense.
Yeah,
But and there are three jacks, right? There's the one by the mayor being
yeah,
dunked, the one in the barrel, and then the one in the chair at the end. So it wouldn't be too
yeah.
hard. And then Barbosa.
No, and
Um,
I mean, you have to come up with some new gags, but um, yeah, I think it'd be great.
because I know a lot of people were afraid with Haunted Mansion and the Eddie Murphy movie, and then later the new Lakeith Stanfield movie, and then also with the Jungle Cruise because of what The Rock was saying that those attractions were all going to mirror like their new movies. So,
Well, those
that's
movies would have to be global phenomenons, right? And if they had become global phenomenons, then yeah, I think it would have happened, but they weren't, so they won't.
Now we moved on to talking about Shanghai, and I've
Yeah,
not been to Shanghai, but I know you have. And so the Pirates attraction there is obviously very different than
yeah.
anything else we've had. And they spend a good chunk of this episode talking about the Shanghai edition. Like I said, they just almost skip over Tokyo. They're like, yeah, it's a combination of the
Yeah.
other two. Anyway, here's France, and that's why it was
Well,
better.
that's
And
where
then,
we come in, right? Like that's why this is a um this is a bird's eye view of it's a big overview of the pirate rides around the world, right? So as a fan, yeah, we want to dissect and go over those minuscule differences, right? But I think for the general public, it's like, yeah, this is mostly the same. Paris, we did this different. Okay. Then finally, very recently, we went and reinvented the wheel. And they're very proud of this, right? It's won a ton of awards. People really love it. Um, So it makes sense. And also, you have access to all these people, right? All these people still work for you, for the most part, or at least did when you were filming this. So,
Yeah, but it's behind the attraction, and most of the time they're spending on the attraction is an attraction that I won't go to. So that's why I'm putting my foot down about this one. No, I'm just kidding. I've
why is
watched
that
those.
their fault?
It's not. It's not their fault. I've watched the video. I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, that if it's something I think I'm going to be able to go to, I won't watch the video ahead of time. I'll wait until I can experience it myself. This one, I've watched the video. It looks pretty amazing. What were your thoughts on it when you wrote it? Because I feel like you weren't too high on Shanghai in general, or am I wrong? Oh,
I was, we beeline to this. It was the first thing we did. And we all looked at each other at the end and going, that was not as great as people said it was. It's real screen heavy. It feels like a Universal ride. The first half is really great. There, it has its moments, but also like a couple of key effects were long gone by the time we got there in 2019, spring of 2019. We went. A lot of the big, so a couple of big effects had gone away for good. They didn't work, and yeah, like the ride system is amazing. It has wow moments, but in the end, I think it lacked the heart and the soul of Pirates of the Caribbean, and all the screen use made it feel very much like something at a Universal. It felt like it could have been more. It's kind of the way I feel about Ratatouille. It felt like it could have been more, but it wasn't.
okay, that's a good. That's fair.
I still
One
think
of the
it's
things
better than Ratatouille, but I just it didn't click for me. You know.
I feel like this is more of a big budget attraction more so than Ratatouille. You know, like it should have
Oh, they
been.
spent way more on this.
Yeah,
Way
this should
more.
have been. Well, that's what
But
I
it
was
felt the
talking.
same where I was like, I had all these big expectations of like, I love these films and this is great material. And it starts off really strong, and then you just get to projection room, projection room, projection room, projection room. And then the animatronics just stop appearing. Like it's animatronic heavy early on. And then like Jack Sparrow, Davy Jones suddenly become screen characters and don't really come back.
Well, I
But
mean,
like
it's
again, you can't deny them this engineering, the technical and engineering feat of this is unreal. Like they really did something fantastic, and I am really sad they haven't gone back to this tech yet for the ride system.
well, that's what I was going to ask you too. Is that right now they're talking about this moving eye point or moving eye point technology of from the boat how everything's going to look looks amazing, and then they move on to, and I don't think we're there yet though, is the magnetic track. And when I looked at that
Yeah.
magnetic track system and how that works, my first thought was, where is this in our domestic parks? So is that, I mean, is that where you're going with, or do you love both
Yeah, I
elements?
just don't know. Maybe it was too expensive. They haven't really come up with anything. I know I remember hearing at one point that when the Jungle Book live action movie hit real big, there was a lot of talk about doing a Jungle Book ride with this ride system, and then didn't hear about it for a while, and now it's kind of gone silent. I assume it's just a very expensive ride system. Maybe they have mechanical problems. Who knows? But maybe we'll see this again. Maybe we won't. I don't know.
Well, I mean, again, it's one of these things where I was looking at it going, wow, this goes back to what I was talking about before. They've finally found something where they've reinvented the wheel and shown us something in a physical effect form that we haven't seen. You know, like the trackless ride systems were like, you know, we didn't have any in Florida, but we had them in other places, and then now we have a bunch of them.
Yeah.
But this
Well, this
magnetic
is genius, but
propulsion.
the ability to like control a boat where it's in the water, um, like that's not completely new. Like they've made a system that works better, but I hate to be that guy. Jaws, the Jaws ride does that. The Jaws ride had motion base and like it had its problems. Don't get me wrong, but it
Right.
it had a motion base and they can control where it was in the ride. So I mean, you know,
Yeah. Um, no, I would love to see them move forward with technology. One of the things that burns me about, like, say, Universal is they went, oh, the Spider-Man ride, that's great. Let's make the Transformers ride, but it's exactly the same
yeah,
thing, only Transformers. I want to see something new and innovative and different, and this appears to be new and innovative and different. It is
it
disappointing to
is.
hear you say that it's not what it should have been. And also a mantle that I keep putting out there is I always want to be there early, because when you get there early, everything is actually still working. And like you said, when you got
Yeah.
there, a lot of the effects weren't happening anymore.
Yeah.
So I can imagine that in an effect heavy attraction like this, any effect not working is going to be a problem. I mean, I get upset when I go on Radiator Springs Racers and Mater doesn't drive backwards. Like these things should all be working. In this particular
Here's your
scene, they're
chicken story.
yeah, so he's talking about the fact that he was short on budget because he wanted to be able to add a chicken, and the gag was important to him to put into it, but that they couldn't afford to CGI the chicken, so he just got live chickens and directed them, which I think is great that that's the thing that happened. But I was like, you're spending this much money and CGI in a chicken is out of budget. That's why I was kind of thrown by that.
So, well, I have no proof of this, right? But I think why it's so screen heavy at the end, I think there was supposed to be more animatronics, and I think they had a reduced budget and they had to figure out how to work within that, you know? So,
Yeah. Uh, now they're flooding the building, which this story is pretty fascinating to me because
this sounds
again,
like every Shanghai story.
I was about to say the
Every
fact.
Shanghai story was something architecturally went horribly wrong because the people that built the thing were not qualified to build it because there weren't enough skilled laborers in the country.
But that
Like I've heard stories from Soren where they went and picked up farmers in a van to go like teach them how to be electricians to help finish Soren. And one Imagineer we talked to said a guy almost fell into a 75-foot, I forget the height, it was 50, 75, 100 feet. So the guy almost fell backwards into this pit where he certainly wouldn't have lived. And he grabbed him by the collar and pulled him back because the guy had no idea what he's doing. So,
yeah.
um, very common of the Shanghai stories.
So right now they're talking about the water that they use to christen,
Yeah,
and when my wife saw this part, she like kind of teared up a little bit. She thought this was so
it's cute.
sweet, the idea of the water from each of the individual other pirates and pouring them in, which is not the first time we've seen this happen in Disney history.
No, it's but
Obviously,
it's a very nice symbolic thing, right?
yeah, no, for sure. But like I think back to the Fountain of Nations, and even further back to
Yeah,
the It's a Small World when they brought that one in, pouring the water in. So I love the
yeah.
idea. It's very, very quintessential Disney that they would do that. But I loved the box that they showed with it, where they each one was in its own individual bottle, and the whole ceremony was very cool. This is the part I think that they're talking about where they're like, okay, we figured
Yeah.
out this great system to drive these boats and move them through magnets and be able to point you where we want you to go and drag you backwards and do all these things, like almost like a trackless ride system in the water, kind of. And yet, the first time they run it, they said you're scraping bolts as you go down, and then at the other end you're like your boat
Yeah.
is flooding. And I just look at that and I go, how did you get that far?
I mean,
Where
right, because these people are bona fide geniuses, right? And
right.
they were so but it's true. Like I completely understand it. They were so focused on doing the impossible that they forgot about like a very mundane fact, right? They forgot about a very simple issue that would occur because they were so focused on doing things that had never been done before that there was just something that maybe you or I would have thought of, but these people are thinking so far beyond that it didn't occur to them.
Yeah.
But they
Unreal.
figured it out.
Again,
I mean,
the amount of money. Yeah. But they said that they had to set up something temporary to make it work, and they made it work with this pump system, and
yeah,
then they ran it through the back of house. I wonder how temporary that looks to this day in back of house. Like, did they do
they
something?
probably installed it.
Yeah.
They probably
This
installed a permanent one.
this stunt show here that they're talking about. I assume you saw the
Yeah,
stunt show when you were there.
yeah.
This looks pretty freaking incredible to me. Obviously, it's not a pirates attraction, but it's pirates themed as for the like
I
the
mean, it's
entire
it's a
land.
pirate attraction. It's Pirates of the Caribbean related.
Okay. It looks pretty
It's
amazing. It's not great.
that end part with the wind vortex is cool, but the rest, the other two people in my traveling party, one of them being Jason, fell asleep in the middle of that. So, um,
Well, I mean, time differences. Hello, he needs his nappies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We had already been
Well,
in Asia for like 2 weeks, so I don't know if that applies at that point.
again, they've done a whole land really surrounding pirates here. It looks very cool to me. But I know again when you guys got back and you gave your honest review of Shanghai, it wasn't glowing, and it doesn't make it seem like something that I'm going to go to anytime soon. I feel like revisiting Paris and going to Tokyo are kind of higher on my list at this point.
Yeah, and rightfully so. Yeah.
Yeah. I did think it was
This I
interesting when they
like.
were
I love that reference. I love that.
oh with the bones.
Yeah, like I said, I really like the first half.
Yeah. No, it's definitely cool. I don't know. I like that we have the standard Pirates of the Caribbean that we have, and then to go see the one at Disneyland feels like I'm seeing a better version, a plussed up version, and so I'm anxious to go see the one in Paris because, like I said, I don't remember as we were sitting there watching that. I was like, I've been to that park. I don't remember seeing that attraction, and it was a long time ago. But
Yeah.
I definitely want. I feel like I need to take that trip sometime soon.
I think that's the right progression. Right? That's the progression I had and the progression my parents have had, where it was begin with Disney World, and then you get introduced to Disneyland, and then the Tokyo one, and then the Paris. You kind of work your way up, and you can see the evolution of it, which is funny because Disney World's later, but you can see the evolution of it until you get to the perfected form. It's a good order.
Yeah. One of the things they talk about here, which is another one of my favorite stories about pirates, is that, and I can't remember if we're seeing it right now. I think we are. Is that as Walt was coming to the end of his life and closing off like the pirates and New Orleans Square, he was there for the opening of New Orleans Square. He was not there for the opening of Pirates of the Caribbean. That they
Yeah,
would they set up a way to be able to bring him through, to be able to see the attraction in as complete
he
a
essentially
way
saw it.
as possible. Yeah, just without the water
He
in the boat.
essentially wrote it. He there just wasn't water, so he saw it, right? So like I know it's like, oh, he didn't see the opening day. The thing with Pirates is he absolutely saw it. Like he knew what it was.
Yeah,
So that's the one thing. The mansion he did not get to really see what that would be.
yeah. Um, so you're saying that out of all the pirates, you would rank Paris number one, no question.
Paris, Tokyo, Anaheim, Florida.
And we put the one
I
from
don't put
Shanghai.
Shanghai in because it's not Pirates of the Caribbean. It's its own thing.
Okay.
It's not the
Um,
ride, right? It's like Mystic Manor. Mystic Manor is not. Eric on the podcast last week wanted to put Mystic Manor in with the Haunted Mansions. You can't. They're not even remotely similar. They don't have the same story beats. They don't have the same characters. They're completely different things. So even though it says Pirates of the Caribbean on the sign, the Shanghai thing is its own. It's its own thing. It's not really Pirates of the Caribbean.
Well, and from the same point of view, when they show, there's the episode in season one about Space Mountain. At the end of that, they talk about Tron being like Shanghai's Space Mountain. I don't agree with that because it's like it is a roller coaster that's partially indoors, but and it may have been the next iteration, but it's not Space Mountain.
See, I that one I disagree because it has
Okay.
all the hallmarks and actually ties back to a hallmark of the attraction. When Walt envisioned it, would be indoor and outdoor, right? So indoor, outdoor, in the dark portions with all this lighting and um, yeah, I mean it embodies what Space Mountain is pretty well, as opposed to that Pirates, which is different ride system, different scenes, different characters. Oh, it's a whole different thing. It doesn't, other than it being a boat, it doesn't embody Pirates of the Caribbean in any way. None of the hallmarks are there. Like the dog with the keys is there as a weird, otherworldly homage, right? So that's the only thing tying. It's like Big Grizzly Mountain or Grizzly Mountain Runaway Mine Cars in Hong Kong is, in spirit a successor to Big Thunder Mountain, but you can't include it in the conversation. It's not Big Thunder Mountain. It's a different ride system. It has different characters. yeah. So there's a moment where there's references to Big Thunder, right? They have the Big Thunder dynamite, but fundamentally it's different things. So just like Mystic and Pirates and that, but it's weird though. But Tron encompasses so much of what Space Mountain is and supposed to be that I'd be more
I,
inclined to include that in that story.
I don't think we see eye to eye on that one because it's its own IP, it's its own characters, it's its own everything. So I get, I get kind of what you're saying, and I also see that like a Space Mountain building in 2016 probably would have felt old. Although I do think they did a great upgrade for the one in Paris, like from the,
Yeah, no, they could have absolutely made a Space Mountain for modern day. And Rob, I'll give you a great example. They're doing one in Japan, and it definitely looks like a new take on the future, right? It looks like the way we look into the future today, as opposed to the way we looked into the future in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, which is what the Anaheim, Orlando, and Tokyo ones are today, right? So
yeah,
it's doable, right? There's enough imagination left in the world to do it. Um,
it can be done if you have the
it
money.
can be, and you're going to see. I mean, I think they're gonna they're gonna blow everybody's socks off with that thing. The fact that it's going to be original IP, a reinvention of a classic Disney attraction for the modern age. It's going to be pretty special.
Very cool. All right, so I'm going to ask you in a second if you would recommend this one, which I feel like I know the answer to that one. But before I do, I want to talk about a couple of things that we have coming up at WDWNT. One of them is a project that you and I have worked on ever since you were like, we have to have this, make this happen, which is Dinosaur Gertie. This has been your dream come true. You can go and pre-order this now at wdwnt.shop or wdwnt.com/Gertie, either one. This is exciting. I mean, carouselproducts.com, you can find it there too. We're making plush. It's happening.
We are. It's been a long road, right? I feel like we talked about plush when we launched Carousel Products, which was how many years ago now?
3.
3 years ago. Yeah. So this
Yep.
has been a long road to Gertie.
But she's real.
We
She's real.
She's real and she's spectacular. And and
Ah,
she's available now, and I love it. And the prototype's great, and I hope everyone gets to own one. I mean, I think if it's not already, it's quickly approaching being our highest selling item of all time, which is no
no, it is.
surprise, right?
Yeah,
It's
it.
it's the most special thing we've done, and so like myself and Rob and a lot of people put a lot of time and effort into making this happen, and we're
Yeah.
very proud of it. And what I think is most special about it is I remember, um, someone at Pixar telling the story. I think in the Pixar documentary, telling the story of like the first time they saw people, like a kid at the airport, holding the Woody and Buzz toys, and on a much smaller scale, we kind of get to live that, right? Several hundred people are going to get to have this in their home, and I'm sure some people bought it for their kid, and it's going to be a part of their lives, and that's a really that's what I love about stuff, right? And we're going to do a whole show in a couple months' time. We're going to start a whole show on this channel about Disney stuff. But what's special about it, right? Is there are memories and emotions connected to these things. Like, yes, they are merchandise, and yes, they are part of the the very commercial lives we lead as Americans. But there is something special about this stuff because of that that emotional investment we have in it. That no, I mean that's based on like one of the worst rides ever built, so not so much.
But it's stuff. I love me some popcorn buckets.
All
Um,
stuff isn't good though. All
oh,
stuff
I,
isn't
I
good,
will.
but then
Yeah,
there's good stuff. I have good stuff. That's a good. This is a good cup for today. My Pirates of the Caribbean rocks glasses from Tokyo. You're not even gonna see Tokyo because I have soda in it, but it says Tokyo Disney there. Can't really
yeah.
see. Yeah, there you go.
Well, I had to pull out my "We Wants the Redhead" shirt. When they were changing the scene, I was like, I got to get this, so
Yeah.
to represent. The other thing I want to talk about before we get final thoughts is the big event coming up, Stage 89, the
Yeah.
celebration of all things 1989 coming up, May 1st through
Well,
May
not this time.
5th.
That was last time. Last
Okay.
time it was a celebration of all things 1989. This time around, Stage 89 is a celebration of 35 years of Hollywood studios and 30 years of the Tower of Terror specifically. We're focusing on that because we are having the largest in person reunion ever of people that worked on the Great Movie Ride, Muppet Vision 3D, Superstar Television, Monster Sound Show, Tower of Terror, Star Tours, The Adventures Continue. Um, this is an all-star lineup, the likes of which we have never had before, and no one has ever gotten these teams together. This park is often the redheaded stepchild, I think, at Disney World, because people are always like, I love Animal Kingdom, it's so pretty, and blah, blah, blah. And obviously, we all love Epcot because it used to be the best park ever. And people like Magic Kingdom because it's the castle park. But Studios is always the one that kind of gets disrespected. And so we started several years ago doing Studios Appreciation Day, and then morphed into the first Stage 89. And now it's morphed into this, which is so far beyond what we've done before. So this is incredible. So it's an opportunity. Um, Essentially, there are some free components. There are some paid components. The paid components are we're doing a meet and greet and autograph signing at the Celebration Brewing Company just down the street on Friday, May 3rd. And then on May 4th and 5th, all of those fantastic creative people, former Imagineers and voiceover artists. We have Mark Silverman, who did the voice of Rod Serling in the Tower of Terror. Um, all those people will be doing presentations and panels for 2 days. So think of it as its own. It's like Hollywood Studios is getting its own D23, and we're putting it on. So it's D23 also without the filter, right? This is not an official Disney event. And we are going to show art. Several of the presenters already told me they're going to bring art that has never been seen before. So you're going to see concept art for Tower and Great Muppet Movie Ride and several of these things you have never seen before. And because Disney is not doing this, you're never going to see them again. It's going to be solely at this event. You're going to hear stories that are not clearable for a D23 event in most cases. So all that's very special. And then on top of that, also we're doing what we always do, which get together at the park on the actual day of the anniversary and do like a scavenger hunt type game, and we'll all go do some group shows and rides, that kind of stuff. And then on May 2nd, on the WDW&T side of things, will be a special day because we're going to do a very special studios episode of News Tonight, which will air on this channel, but also you can come be a part of in person. But that day will mark the reopening of our space here at WDW&T Celebration. Where I'm sitting now will no longer exist as a space I can sit. This will be part of an expanded museum and lounge. I think, in fact, I'm sitting where our Disney MGM Studios 35th anniversary gallery will eventually be, instead of being the corner where I throw all my stuff. So it'll be nice. We're going to move the office side of the facility to the other side where it's sort of backstage, where you won't get to see all this clutter and the things we need to do to make the company work. That'll all be behind the scenes, and then you guys only get to come see the magic. You get to see beautiful lounge and museum space and a much bigger and cleaner studio facility for our live shows as well. So we're very excited. All that just part of Stage 89, which all proceeds of that entire event go to Give Kids the World. We're not making a cent off of it. It's really about doing something for the fans and preserving these stories and having a once in a lifetime gathering. That's what it's all about.
And if you want more information on that, you can go to stage89.com. It's all right
Yeah.
there.
Streaming tickets are half off only through March 15th. So if you want to stream it from home, it's only $10. It's going to go up to $19.89
I see
on
what you did there.
March 15th. So make sure you get your streaming ticket now if you're not going to join us in person. If you are going to join us in person, you better hurry because tickets are going fast. I have limited capacity for the panel days on the 4th and 5th. We do have more space for the autograph signing, but then you don't get to hear all the stories and see all the concept art. So, you know.
There also, I think, is a discount for our Wigs members, or so. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Each level of Wigs has a different discount code. So.
Okay. And we love our Wigs, the WWNT Interglobe Society. If you want to
I
find
didn't know
out
this
more
was a
about
thing.
how to dude, come
The
on.
wigs must be explored. No, that's not it.
If you want to find out more about how to become part of our family, you can go to patreon.com/WDWNT for more information. One last thing before we get that final is I didn't talk to you about this. This is the continuation of the legacy for Pirates. Are you excited about this thing coming? Yeah.
Peg Leg Pete is my favorite. Has been since I was a kid. I actually have at home in New York before they didn't even make a real plush. They made a real plush a couple years ago, but there was sort of like a hand stitched plush of Peg Leg Pete on a what's the word I'm looking for, perch. They sold when I was a kid, and I have that in my room, and I've never seen anyone else with it. I love it to death.
I
So I've
smell
always
a
loved that
sequel.
character. I'm so sad he was removed in '06. He was exclusive to Florida. He's such an important part of the legacy here. He was the one
Yep.
cool, unique thing, right? So the fact that I don't even care about the lounge aspect, that could be fun. That's great. But Peg Leg Pete is all I care about. I'm so happy he gets to come back.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. All right. So again, there were 16 episodes of Behind the Attraction. We did from season 1. We only did Haunted Mansion. You and I talked about Pirates tonight, and we may be able to get you back to talk about at least Epcot. That would be great to have that conversation. So hopefully more to come. But just this episode, I gotta assume I know the answer to this, but it's something we ask every time on Deep in the Plus. Tom Corliss, would you recommend this episode?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good high level overview. I think it
Okay.
does a decent job. If you, I will say, if you're this audience and you've watched like Back to the Future and stuff on Pirates, maybe not, but also like you're a Parks fans, you can never get enough. So I'd still turn it on, even if you put in the background while you're cleaning or doing work or something. I'd still watch it.
Yeah, I think the series is fun, and it's again like we talked about at the top of the hour. It's very stackable content. It doesn't take itself too seriously. There's a lot of interesting little facts. A lot of it, as Disney Parks fans, you may already know, but I never get tired of the behind the scenes stuff, which is really the stuff that I wanted when I got Disney Plus, is to have more of those things that I always used to see on the Travel Channel or on in between Disney Channel shows and things like that. So I'm excited that this exists. Would definitely recommend the entire show, but definitely, the Pirates of the Caribbean was worth the watch. It's 50 minutes. It goes by fast, and it walks you all the way through beginning to end. And thank you guys for everybody that joined us for our watch along. We appreciate it. We will be back next Wednesday night for another Deep in the Plus with Raiders of the Lost Ark. We're finally doing that one next
Wow.
Wednesday night. And then join us tomorrow night for News Tonight, right? And then
Yeah,
uh,
that's how.
and then Sunday for another episode of Park Center. Thanks a lot, Tom. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And y'all have a great one. We appreciate every one of you for tuning in to Deep in the Plus. Have a great week.